Συνεργαζόμαστε με το τρίτο Διεθνές Φεστιβάλ Βιβλίου της Λεμεσού και θα παρουσιάσουμε μέσα στα πλαίσια αυτού του φεστιβάλ την εκδήλωσή μας, την οποία οργανώνουμε εδώ και όχι πάρα πολλά, αλλά 2-3 χρόνια, Versopolis στην Κύπρο, Versopolis in Cyprus. Το Ideogramma είναι μέλος της Versopolis, της πλατφόρμας της Versopolis, που αποτελείται από περίπου ή 36 σύνολο χώρες φεστιβάλ της Ευρώπης. Και ποιος είναι ο σκοπός της Versopolis? Όπως είπα, είναι μια πλατφόρμα πανευρωπαϊκή και συνεργάζονται σημαντικά λογοτεχνικά φεστιβάλ ποίησης και προσπαθεί να προσφέρει νέες ευκαιρίες σε αναδυόμενους Ευρωπαίους νεαρούς ποιητές, οι οποίοι είναι ήδη αναγνωρισμένοι στις χώρες καταγωγής τους. Πρώτος και κύριος στόχος είναι η προώθηση αυτών των Ευρωπαίων ποιητών και του έργου τους πέρα από τα σύνορα της χώρας τους, καθώς επίσης και η δημιουργία μιας στενά δεμένης ποιητικής κοινότητας, ώστε να προωθεί και να παρουσιάζει στο κοινό τις σημαντικές αυτές ποιητικές φωνές και το όραμα συνεργασίας της ευρωπαϊκής ιδέας. Οι χορηγοί μας για αυτήν την εκδήλωση είναι πρώτα απ' όλα το πρόγραμμα Creative Europe, το Υφυπουργείο Πολιτισμού, η Πρεσβεία της Αυστρίας και ο πολιτιστικός οργανισμός Προχελβέτσια της Ελβετίας. Μεσημέρι τώρα, παρουσιάζουμε την Cornelia Hülmbauer, η οποία είναι από την Αυστρία. Θα είχαμε μαζί μας και τον Sascha Garzetti, που είναι από την... από πού είναι ακριβώς? Είναι από την Ελβετία, αλλά... Ζηρίχη, ναι, από την Ελβετία, αλλά λόγω προσωπικών προβλημάτων, οικογενειακών, δυστυχώς δεν μπόρεσε να ταξιδέψει. Και έτσι θα σας διαβάσω μικρά βιογραφικά των συμμετεχόντων σε αυτήν την εκδήλωση. Πρώτα της Cornelia Hülmbauer. Είναι ποιήτρια πεζογραφίας, ποιήτρια και πεζογράφος, λογοτεχνικών δοκιμίων και πειραματικών κειμένων που ασχολούνται με τις οικογενειακές δομές, τους ρόλους των φύλων, την κοινωνική τάξη, την μνήμη και το τραύμα. Πήρε διδακτορικό δίπλωμα στην εφαρμοσμένη γλωσσολογία από το Πανεπιστήμιο της Βιέννης και πτυχίο στις γλωσσικές τέχνες. Συμμετείχε σε διεθνή ερευνητικά προγράμματα σχετικά με τη γλωσσική πολυμορφία και την πολυγλωσσία. Για τα λογοτεχνικά της κείμενα έχει τιμηθεί με διάφορες επιχορηγήσεις και βραβεία. Πρόσφατες δημοσιεύσεις της περιλαμβάνουν ένα φυλάδιο ποίησης και ένα μυθιστόρημα, το οποίο βγήκε το 2023. Θα πω μόνο λίγα λόγια για τον Sascha Garzetti, μια που θα τον είχαμε μαζί μας σήμερα. Σπούδασε γερμανικά, ιστορία και σκανδιναβική λογοτεχνία στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Ζηρίχης και διδάσκει γερμανικά στη μέση εκπαίδευση, καθώς και δημιουργική γραφή σε κοινοτικό κολέγιο. Οργανώνει εργαστήρια γραφής για νέους, συμμετέχει σε ένα πρόγραμμα μαζί με άλλους συγγραφείς που γράφουν ποίηματα για ανθρώπους που πέθαναν μόνοι και τα απαγγέλνουν στην κηδεία τους. Το 2022 εξασφάλισε επιχορήγηση για συγγραφή, το οποίο χρησιμοποίησε ο ίδιος, και η πιο πρόσφατη ποιητική του συλλογή εκδόθηκε το 2018. Και τώρα στους Κωνσταντίνο Παπαγεωργίου και Αλέξανδρο Chronides, οι οποίοι είναι μέσα στην πλατφόρμα της Versopolis, είναι οι ποιητές που αντιπροσωπεύουν την Κύπρο σε αυτό το πρόγραμμα, μαζί με κάποιους άλλους φυσικά. Ο Κωνσταντίνος Παπαγεωργίου έχει εκδώσει 3 ποιητικές συλλογές και οι 3 ποιητικές του συλλογές μπήκαν στη βραχία λίστα για τα κρατικά βραβεία ποίησης. Και θα πω ότι είναι οι 5 εποχές το 2012, ο υπερκαινοφανής το 2017 και η πρόσφατη ανθρωπόκαινος το 2023. Λοιπόν, οι 5 εποχές ήταν επίσης στη βραχία λίστα του βραβείου Γιάννη Βαρβέρη για πρωτοεμφανιζόμενο ποιητή στην Αθήνα, στην Ελλάδα. Η συλλογή του Carte Postale που δεν έστειλα, του 2019, βραβεύτηκε από την Ένωση Λογοτεχνών Κύπρου με βραβείο νέου ποιητή κάτω των 40 ετών. Σε κάποιο διαγωνισμό, σε ένα διαγωνισμό που είχαν προκηρύξει. Έχει εκπροσωπήσει την Κύπρο στο Ευρωπαϊκό Πρωτάθλημα Poetry Slam στη Βουδαπέστη, λόγω της διάκρισής του στο δεύτερο Διεθνές Poetry Slam Cyprus. Τα ποίηματά του περιλαμβάνονται σε αρκετές ανθολογίες. Και τώρα ο Αλέξανδρος Chronides γεννήθηκε στη Βόνη, στη Γερμανία, το 1994 και μεγάλωσε στην Κύπρο. Σπούδασε φιλοσοφία και οικονομικά στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Εδιμβούργου, από όπου αποφοίτησε το 2019. Το πάθος του για την ποίηση ξεκίνησε νωρίς, κερδίζοντας το πρώτο του βραβείο σε ηλικία 10 χρονών. Ως έφηβος πήρε πολλά βραβεία ποίησης και ένα βραβείο διηγήματος από το Υπουργείο Παιδείας. Κατά τη διάρκεια των σπουδών του στο Εδιμβούργο, ποίηματά του δημοσιεύθηκαν σε λογοτεχνικά περιοδικά στην Κύπρο και το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο. Το 2018 εξέδωσε την πρώτη του ποιητική συλλογή «Πέτρες και έλεος», που ήταν και υποψήφια για το βραβείο νέου συγγραφέα από το Υπουργείο Παιδείας, το οποίο όμως είχε εκδοθεί και είναι διπλή έκδοση και στα αγγλικά.
Είναι δίγλωση.
Είναι δίγλωση. Και το 2021 εξέδωσε τη δεύτερη ποιητική του συλλογή, «Ενδιάμεση έκθεση για την ενηλικίωση». Θα αφήσω τη συζήτηση τώρα στους νεαρούς Βερσοπολίτες και να τους απολαύσουμε.
And we're going to talk in English, of course. First of all, thank you to Ideogramma and Versopolis for allowing us to travel to several festivals in Europe, as Cornelia is doing today.
So I was thinking, should we start with some reading from you, some poetry reading, and then blend our questions in with some more reading?
All right. So I'll read the first 4 poems of a cycle called Lose Posten. And maybe I should say it's very concise, very short, and it takes maybe a bit of a strange shape, and that's due to the process of the writing, because it's based on a correspondence of my grandmother from the 1940s.
So can you explain a bit more about the process of,
sorry.
of this? Is it a book? Did you publish a book with this theme?
Unfortunately, not yet.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So you had the correspondence of your grandmother,
Yeah.
and then you transformed it in some way?
Exactly. I mean, it was written in Chronides. It's an older kind of handwriting. So at first I couldn't even read it. So at first I wanted to learn how to transcribe it myself, but it took ages. So I got somebody to transcribe it for me. And then with this material, I just kind of took everything apart and then reassembled parts.
You also, of course we're going to read it, but you also kept some of the strange language that it was written in. We talked about it yesterday. Instead of und, you just keep the u with the full stop.
Exactly, there are some abbreviations, and also if there were typos and everything, I just kept everything as it was written in the letters, yeah.
And what was the exact language that your grandmother wrote? What was the language?
It was German, but a different kind of handwriting, so, yeah.
That's lovely. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of already fucked up your concept. So I will read now. Ich wünsche dir Erinnerung und damit mir. Ich schüttle wach mich, so wie ich dich vergesse. Jetzt schüttelst vielleicht du, weißt du, wir wirst sehen. Nun lass.
That's lovely.
We will translate, right?
Yes. Would you like to read it in Greek and I will read it in English? Or should we do... Yeah.
Αναρτώντας ασύνδετα αποσπάσματα νούμερο 1. Σου εύχομαι μνήμη, όπως και μένα. Κουνιέμαι να ξυπνήσω καθώς σε ξεχνώ. Τώρα ίσως να κουνιέσαι κι εσύ. Ξέρεις, εμείς. Θα δεις. Τώρα άσε.
Loose mail. Fragments 1. I wish you memory, and myself as well. I shake myself awake, like I forget you. Now maybe you're shaking. You know us. You'll see. Now let me be.
Okay.
Sorry if I massacred your poem in my reading, but...
Yeah. Every interpretation is fine, you know. Bestimmt sagen wollen, stimmt. Das klingt wie nach, ich weiß, du wirst gleichen, dir, du bleiben, allernächst.
It sounds very melodic to me,
Yes, it's...
the way you read it, and German as well. German.
Even in German.
I didn't expect it to be so melodic. Ορίζεις, θέλοντας να πεις οριστικά. Και αυτό ακούγεται κάπως σαν, ξέρω, θα σου μοιάζεις. Θα μείνεις η πιο κοντινή.
Loose mail, fragments 2. Determined, wanting to say right, that sounds like after. I know you will resemble yourself. You remain very next.
Vom Kopf fielen mir Bilder, vielleicht zufällig, in die Hand, mit Stein ins Leben gegrüßt. Ja und?
Από το κεφάλι μου έπεφταν εικόνες, ίσως τυχαία, στα χέρια μου. Με πέτρες με καλωσόρισε η ζωή. Ναι.
I'm dropping head shots, maybe by chance, in my hand, with stone welcome to life. Yes, and?
Okay, and the last one. Weißt du? Na, was sagst du? Sag nicht nein. Hörst du? Mein Knoten ist gegangen.
Ξέρεις. Λοιπόν, τι λες? Μη λες όχι. Ακούς? Ο κόμπος μου έφυγε.
You know, well, what do you say? Don't say no. Listen, my knot has gone.
Thank you.
This was lovely, and thank you very much.
In this booklet, there are 5 fragments.
Yeah.
How many are they in total?
Way too many. I mean, these are from one cycle of poems, and then I did another one, which is kind of like a dialogue, and where the words are assembled, you know, across the page, and then you basically can decide which words to read first, and so on. Yeah, so I kind of tried some things out, and I mean, it was only 8 letters, but I found this so productive, this method, because of course you never have the white page, you always have material to work with, and that was kind of enjoyable, yeah. But on the other hand, it was also, I mean, I found it a bit tricky because, you know, the letters are from right after the Second World War. And I never really was able to talk to my grandmother about this issue because she passed away when I was still pretty young. And so I was really excited when I found the letters because I thought, okay, now I will find out her opinion and what she thought right after the war, because during the war she was really kind of, I must say, I guess a fan of the regime. And I was curious if she kind of regretted things. But the language is really, I don't know, formulaic. I couldn't really tell. And at first I was kind of disappointed. And then I thought, okay, maybe I can, you know, if I tear it apart and reassemble it, maybe the material kind of speaks to me. And it was really, I mean, it was an interesting process, yeah.
Who was she writing to?
To a man she obviously met during the war, but I never really found out who he really was, yeah.
Not your grandfather.
No, that's for sure. It was not my grandfather.
That's very interesting. I will derail a bit this conversation, but taking on from the first poem that you wrote, that you read, the Loose Mail Fragment 1, and I will take it on a bit of a more philosophical level, and we ask. In that poem, you start by saying, "I wish you memory, and myself as well." How has memory shaped your poetry, and how do you view or approach memory in literature in general, and your life in general?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yes, I mean, we can discuss
a couple
it,
of big questions, yeah. Yeah, thank you, because memory is really a very important concept for me also in other texts. Because the longer I think of it, the less certain I become of it, you know. Because after all, I mean, like at first glance you think, okay, if I just think hard enough, then I will remember right. But as we know, there is nothing like right memory,
Yeah.
not the one truth, but everybody has their own memories. So I think it's basically remembering something involves a process of fictionalization. You know, you kind of construct a narrative for yourself to make sense of what you experienced.
It does seem like there's an element of creation in the memory process itself. Like you put it nicely, you create a narrative, or you might as well be building the whole structure in which the facts can operate, and it's very interesting. But I would like to ask you, for example, personally, I've been troubled by memory in the past. So I wish you memory would be almost like a curse for me. Do you like like memory as a function of our brains and as a?
I don't know if I like it, but I always find myself working with it. Yeah. But it's also, I mean, in this poem, of course, it's kind of a dialogue between me and my grandmother. And then maybe it's also a bit of a curse, or at least, you know, addressing her, why didn't you, or why did you refuse to keep up the memory, or I don't know, yeah. So.
That's very interesting, actually.
I wish you memory as well, to be honest, because for me it's a big fear that at some point in the future I will lose my memory. I think having your memory is what builds you and makes who you are. And I also agree with you that there is not an objective memory, and we construct our memory while we're writing, especially, I mean, the writers. The process of writing is how you build the memory.
Have you ever found yourself because I think I have sometimes, based on what Constantinos said, have you found yourself writing something and then going using a memory and then going back at the piece of literature or a poem and saying, wait a minute, that's not what actually happened, or, you know?
I did it with, once I wrote a text after a night out with a friend, because it was some strange things had happened. So I thought, okay, I write it down. And then I showed him the text, and he had a completely different memory of this night. And I found it really fascinating, but also quite dangerous, because I was convinced it was exactly like that. So.
It's very interesting.
Always two sides of the same story.
Yeah.
I have another question that is a bit more, well,
Yeah, of course. It's. I mean, it's a big tool for identity. You know, you make sense of what happened and how you became who you are. I mean, it shapes you. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Okay. So linked to the idea of memory is the idea of trauma. And I mean, artists in general, but I mean, poets, writers in general, they always use or utilize trauma in their writings in order to inform, sometimes shape, sometimes try to dig deeper into the wound, or sometimes try to cover it, or sometimes try to exorcise it and pull it out, push it away. Do you find yourself? I mean, it's part of the universal human experience, trauma. Do you find yourself writing to dig deeper into stuff, or to heal some stuff, or to push away some stuff? What is your approach, or is it a mix according to each poem?
I guess it's a mix, and it also depends on the text. But as I experience it, trauma is very much the unspeakable or the unspoken of. So I see myself as kind of giving voice to things, or also to people, and that's really, I think, my main agenda. Yeah.
That's lovely. I have another question on this, because she mentioned the unspeakable, and I will. So sorry for this, but I will exercise all my questions, right? So, and this is for. I will also involve Constantinos and me, because it's a general question for all poets to consider. Well, when we write confessional poems, or utilizing the unspeakable, or talking about stuff that have been traumatic, etc. Love affairs, disappointments, even deeper stuff that are far worse than a love disappointment. Do we write them in order to share our demons and be more open with the world? Or do we write it to encourage others to speak about themselves and their experiences? And basically, I wanted to ask, is this some kind of emotional bravery, or is it emotional exhibitionism? in that because there's an element of look, I've been through all this stuff and I'm still here, and a deeper question might be, is there a narcissistic element in writing poetry in general?
Definitely, I would I would say yes, but hopefully not only.
Yes.
I mean...
We shouldn't be too tough on ourselves. I mean, but I think...
I mean, of course, it always depends on the form as well. So, I mean, it's not enough to just, write your diary and then put it out there.
I completely.
And then also, I mean, I'm always hoping that I'm able to work out something that's more universal for people to take something for themselves. But it's really a tricky question. I agree.
Me, I'm a bit ashamed because I also consider myself that I write confessional poetry, but I am a bit scared or ashamed when I publish it because I think that I reveal personal information through this. So I don't do it in a narcissistic way because I'm always considering if I should publish some of my poems. For example, in my last book, in the last minute, I eliminated some of my poems because of this, because I thought there was too much information about my life that I didn't want to be so much exposed.
That's quite interesting. This is a question that has because I also, well, my last book was very confessional, and sometimes I look back at it and I say, well, was it really an honest? I thought I was being very honest in it, and there are honest emotions in there that I had felt. But on the other hand, I was like, were you being a bit of an exhibitionist there in terms of like showing your hearts? Does the world like really need to know every toxic thought you ever had, or you know what I mean? So there's certainly. Of course, I didn't see it in your poetry, but I think there's certainly a fine balance between sharing emotions and trying to touch on this universality and trying to appeal and show to everyone that, we are also feeling these emotions and it's okay to feel those emotions, etc. And on the other hand, being a bit narcissistic and, even trying to show that, the stuff I've been through, none of you have been through. You know what I mean? It kind of borders on it, and it's quite interesting because, I mean, I think the way poetry functions is the universality of it.
I think readers don't perceive it in such a way that they would consider you are a narcissist. When you do confessional poetry. I think they identify, I think people like reading confessional poetry because it's like they're reading the diary of someone.
Yeah, it seems authentic, and that's a good thing, yeah.
For example, some people approach me and they say, I read this, did this really happen? They wouldn't emphasize on the text, on the form of the text. They emphasize on the experience behind the text.
Yeah. And also, as you said, you didn't really see it in my text. Yes, I think that's because, I mean, they are a bit older. And I'm kind of, for me, it's maybe the opposite process, because I used to write, very elaborate, enigmatic poetry. Okay. But then at some point I was thinking, maybe I'm also hiding behind my poetry. So I'm trying to be more, clear, open. Yeah.
Would you like to read us the
enigmatic
yes
texts? So that's from a totally different cycle of poems. So I'll read the first one on page 16. Treffen sich zwei, brüsten sich zwei. Vereinzelt beginne, Fleck auf Flanke, Drang nach Haltung, man sieht's dir an, man sieht's. Einander am Sternum, gemeinsam Geheimnis, Rachen, sagst du, meinst statt Mündung Mehrzahl. Die Sippschaft im Nacken, wer war beteiligt, wer gibt sein Zeugnis ab, sein Hemd. Lass uns einander zu Blutschwestern trinken, zum Einstand den Flaschen die Hälse traktieren. Ehestens ehren, schließlich unendlich, nennst mich Komplizin, nach Tagen schon. Sag nicht, du zählst nicht, bekenn dich, bist immer im Takt.
So should I read it in Greek now? Σμίγουν δύο και καμαρώνουν. Σποραδικά ξεκινώ. Σημάδι στα πλευρά, ανάγκη τοποθέτησης. Το δείχνεις, το βλέπουμε. Η μια για την άλλη κατάστηθα. Κατάβαθα το μυστικό λες. Γδικιωμούς αντί για τον πληθυντικό της κάνεις. Όλη η γενιά στο σβέρκο σου ποιος ήταν εμπλεγμένος, ποιος θα δώσει αναφορά και ποιος το ρούχο του. Έλα να πιούμε, σταυραδελφές να γίνουμε κι ας το γιορτάσουμε, κακοποιώντας τους λαιμούς των μπουκαλιών. Συντόμως από σίδερο, στο τέλος, δίχως τέλος, σε λίγες κιόλας μέρες, συνένοχο με λες. Μη λες πως δεν μετράς και παραδέξου, ποτέ δεν χάνεις το ρυθμό.
When two meet, then two boast. Sporadically beginning, spot on hip, urge to pose, you can tell, you can see it, each other at the sternum together, secret, you say throat, meaning more than mouth, your family in your face, who was involved, who gave witness, who took shirt off his back. Let's be blood sisters. Drink to that, maltreating bottlenecks, at least brazen, finally, forever. Call me an accomplice days later already. Don't say you don't count. Admit it. You're always in time.
So it's quite enigmatic, isn't it?
I really like the you're always in time. Of course, you meant rhythm there, right? Or is it sight?
Also,
Yeah, I understand the play.
yeah.
It was a very, I understand that meanings have, words can have two meanings. It was a very non-poetic thing for me to ask you. But yes.
Okay, so one more?
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So I'll take page 22. Aus der Hüfte schießen, vor den Hunden gehen. Oder Tier. Vielleicht brauchst du es nicht genauer wissen. Reicht dir die Idee von Unzucht, dass es durch die Zäune dringt und alle Sorten ähnlich sind am Ende. Mit dem Hut des Jägers schickst du mich in die Reviere, an die Grenzen, wo man Zähne zieht, da ist Faustrecht schon Gesetz. Bestiarium der Sammler, Klauber, Raffer, jedes Lochverfolger, wie gebückt, so anvisiert, nach dem Streifschuss in den Mund. Ich vor dir, ich stehe fest, du schleifst deine Köter heim.
Μπαμ και κάτω. Ψόφος κακός. Ιχτίνος. Ίσως δεν χρειάζεται να ξέρεις περισσότερα. Η ιδέα της ασέλγειας σου αρκεί για να σπάσει το φράγμα. Κι όλα τα είδη στην τελική είναι ίδια. Με καπέλο κυνηγούμε ξαμολά στους κυνηγότοπους, στις μεθορίους, εκεί όπου βγάζουν δόντια. Εκεί το δίκαιο του ισχυρού είναι κιόλας νόμος. Ζωολόγιο συλλέκτια ή τον ήχη, λαιλάτη κάθε τρύπα και ένας διώχτης, όπως σκύψεις θα σημαδέψεις. Μετά τον πυροβολισμό, στο στόμα που σε πήρε εξώφαλτσα. Μπροστά σου στέγω εγώ γερά στα πόδια μου. Εσύ θα σέρνεις τους κοπρίτες σου στο σπίτι.
Shoot from the hips, go to the dogs. Or animal maybe, you don't know exactly, Does the idea of offense suffice to get it through the fence? And all types are similar in the end. With a hunter's cup, you send me into the forest, to the borders where teeth are pulled and the rule of thumb is already law. Beastly, the collector, robber, hoarder, haunting each hole bent over, double after the grazing shot in the mouth. I stand firm in the view of you. You drag your mutts home.
How does it feel for you to hear your poems in Greek and then in English?
In Greek, I mean, it's really interesting, but it's also a bit scary because, I mean, I don't understand a word. So, I mean, you could read anything, basically. So I really have to trust you with that. And also the translator, of course. So, I mean, that's always an interesting process, yeah. But, I mean, of course, I mean, also the concept of translation is, I don't know, I mean, really interesting if you look at it more closely, because, of course, there is no such thing as a really true translation or something. I mean, there is always decisions to be made, and it can always only be, you know, an approximate version. And I think it's also a good thing. I mean, something new emerges on the basis of my text. So, yeah.
Have you ever made any remarks on the translation of your work?
Remarks? You
I
mean,
mean, did you make any suggestions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I think too many. If I know the language, the translators are, I don't know if they are happy with me having so many remarks, but I really enjoy being in touch with the translators, yeah.
For example, this translation that Alexandros read,
yeah.
Did you have conversation with translator?
Very much, yeah. And it's also, I mean, you also get to know your own texts from a totally different perspective. And I mean, because translators, they ask so interesting questions, and then you're like, yeah, that's what's also in there. So, yeah, it's nice.
Let me introduce you to Despina Pilketi. She's our own translator to English. She's for you too, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the poems that you see on Versopolis platform in English, she translated for us. So,
yeah.
Yes. Because you also studied linguistics, let's stick to the translation part and say, can there be, like, do you believe, like, the idea of the poem can be preserved in the translation, or because of the language, the pictures are interwoven with the language so much that it's basically a different poem based on the poem you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, not a totally different poem, of course. And as I said, there are always,
Of course.
Sometimes you have to decide if you want to keep with the form more or with the content more. But yeah, I mean, I think the basic idea of a poem hopefully can be preserved and transposed in a way, yeah.
How does it feel for you, Despina, when we send you back the translation you made with remarks on it? How does it feel?
It's very helpful.
Okay.
First of all, and it's also an eye-opener. In some cases, I'm not really sure. It's always ambiguous. And then if you're using tropes like wordplays and metaphors and... I'm getting this. So, thank you. So I was saying that it's always interesting for the translator as well to work with the poets, especially as far as poetry is concerned. It becomes much more complicated, but also it can be much more creative. So if I'm working with people that I can, you know, there has to be chemistry between the poet and the translator as well. So if you're using tropes like wordplays and metaphors and similes, and I need to reproduce, is what you said before, that so there it feels safe when I ask both I've done the same with Angela, with every poet that I have worked with. Is it okay to use this one? We are deviating from the original, but we are reproducing the trope. So it's very, very creative for me as well.
Okay, I think we don't have a lot of time, so maybe we should also read some work of Sascha.
Yes.
Yeah, because he was not able to come after all. And Despina also has made the translation to Greek for some of his poems. So we can... yeah. I cannot read it in German. She could read it in German. So maybe we can...
Will be cold reading because I'm not really prepared.
Yes. I really like the...
Okay, which one?
Το χιόνι πέφτει, the Schnee fällt.
On page 8.
Yeah, 8.
So should I start with the German version?
Which page is it?
8.
8, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Der Schnee fällt der Landschaft auf den Mund, macht alles still. Wie ihr kleiner werdet, jede in ihren Schlaf versunken und eine weiß, von der anderen nichts. Die Krähe draußen auf dem Geländer, du im Krankenbett. Später wird eine den Tod davontragen und eine wird unsagbar leicht.
Το χιόνι πέφτει, στο τοπίο πάνω στο στόμα, κάνει τα πάντα ήσυχα. Πώς μεγαλώνεις. Όλοι έχασαν τον ύπνο τους και ο ένας δεν ξέρει τίποτε από τον άλλον. Το κοράκι έξω στο κυγκλίδωμα, εσύ στο κρεβάτι του πόνου. Αργότερα κάποιος μεταφέρει τον θάνατο και κάποιος άλλος γίνεται απροσδόκητα ελαφρύς. The translation is not one of Despina's, this one. We can do it later.
Snow falls upon the mouth of the landscape, rendering all still. How you become smaller, all sunken in your slumber, one knowing nothing of the other. The crows outside on the railing, you in the sick bed. Later one will carry death away, the other becoming unspeakably light.
And we could continue with page number 22.
Ich schreibe, klopfe mit Wörtern an eine Tür, von der ich nicht weiß, ob es sie gibt. Suche drinnen, draußen nach einer Stimme für die Nacht, bevor sie eine findet für mich.
Γράφω, χτυπώ με λέξεις μια πόρτα που δεν ξέρω αν υπάρχει, ψάχνοντας εντός, εκτός, για μια φωνή, για τη νύχτα, πριν να βρει η νύχτα μια φωνή για μένα. Μετάφραση Δέσποινα Πυρκετή.
I write, knock, with words upon a door that I don't know exists, searching within, without, for a voice, for the night, before it finds a voice for me. I also I want to find wait. Snow blankets in the hillside. I need to find it in the because I have the English one.
What's the title in
Yes,
English?
yes. So, χιόνι σκεπάζει την πλαγιά, page 16. Schnee liegt in den Hängen.
Schnee liegt in den Hängen, wie eine Herde Schafe, birgt das Licht aus dem Winter. Sehe die Maulwurfshügel auf den Feldern, aufgeworfen gegen die Kälte. Sehe vor unseren Mündern den Hauch aufsteigen und die Wörter, die hindurchschlüpfen, die von der Kindheit erzählen, wie von einem Ort, an dem ich lange nicht war.
Χιόνι σκεπάζει την πλαγιά, σαν κοπάδι με πρόβατα που φυγαδεύουν το φως του χειμώνα. Κοίτα τα χωμάτινα ψηλώματα στα χωράφια, πώς σκορπίστηκαν στον παγετό. Κοίτα μπροστά στο στόμα μας την άχνα της ανάσας μας, τις λέξεις που γλιστρούν και μιλούν τα παιδικά μας χρόνια, σαν να ήταν τόπος που έχω να δω καιρό. Μετάφραση Δέσποινα Πυρκετή.
Snow blankets the hillside like a herd of sheep harboring the winter light. See the molehills in the fields thrown up against the cold. See before our mouths our rising breath and the words slipping through, speaking of childhood, like a place I haven't been in a very long time. Thank you. I think.
According to Lily, we need to read now some of our own work.
Do we have time or, okay.
7, okay. Okay, where should I go first or you
please.
go? It's called Easter Day. It was written in the first Easter that we had quarantine in 2020. The living with the living, the dead with the dead. As for me, both living and dead, because that's what you decided. The Passion of Christ is over, the crucifixion too. Some loyal friends took care of the decapitation, but it's too soon to be talking about my resurrection. No happy news for me. Only happy Easter. Your wishes reached my tiny room and stepped all over me. There is also this lethal virus wandering in the city, from body to body, from mouth to mouth. I'm not talking, of course, for the disease of love. Curfew, too. I didn't visit anyone. No one visited me, because us, the vulnerable of this world, are in danger. All these deaths weren't enough for you. What was the hurry to abolish me on these days of celebration, on these days of quarantine? 200,000 deaths on the evening news. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to announce one more.
Since you spoke of resurrection, I will read a poem. It's called Outro. It's the last poem in my last book, basically. So, if you want to find the truth, you'll have to lose some things first. If you want to find love, you'll have to lose some things first. If you want to find anything worth finding, really, you'll have to lose some things first. If you want to find white cyclamens of joy on the banks of the river that is life, you'll have to lose the beautifully thorny roses on the sidewalks of death's one-way certainty. If you are sick of losing things, I get you. George and Mark and Mary and Phoebe, I get you. You're tired of concepts like truth and love and loss. You're tired of searching and searching. You want to lay on the bed one day and just breathe and say, I have found enough, I have enough. The crow can grow, the bee can flee, the mouth can shut, the eyes too, the smile can rest, the search party can break up, the birds can fly in different directions at last. And love and truth and concepts like these can remain unfound. We don't have to lose anything anymore trying to find things which are so well hidden, narcissistic gods who demand such sacrifices. I get you, I feel you, and if anyone doesn't, put it this way. Doesn't a kiss on the cheek from a good friend feel better than a nail in each limb, vinegar in your thirsty mouth, or the crushing conceptual and physical burden of resurrection? Thank you.
And the last one, it's called Genocide. It was written for a friend of mine who is transgender. There was definitely something wrong. Ever since he could remember himself, he couldn't wear his gender. A piece of skin hanging for so many years, a piece of skin he never wanted, and yet impossible to take off. 20 years times 365 days times 24 hours. He tried a few times to cut it off without success. Only left with a few cuts as a reminder. His family contributed to the genocide of the transgender population. We gave birth to a son, not a daughter, for God's sake. It's been so long, he has already gotten used to the infanticide. Anyway, let's not think about all this today. She smiles. It's about time, I said with a shaking voice. Are you ready to go in? Finally, the moment of your gender side has arrived.
I will finish with a short one. I read you the outro poem. I will read you the intro poem now, which is the first, the first poem in there. And I think it's also the only, like, I don't know, positive poem I've ever written or something. So, or like one in the top 3 or something. So let's end with a positive note. First person view. First person view. A Sisyphus son tracing the barrel of a gun back to you. Good morning, good night. Through our immense love and fright, believe me, it all turns out all right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cornelia, for being here. And
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.